The wedding invitation slipped from my trembling hands and fluttered to the kitchen floor like a betrayal made tangible. There it was, in elegant gold script. Sarah Chen and Marcus Washington request the pleasure of your company. My ex-husband's name paired with my best friend of 15 years, set for a ceremony just 3 weeks away. I stared at the cream-colored cardstock, my mind reeling. Sarah had been my maid of honor when Marcus and I got married 22 years ago. She'd held my hand through our messy divorce 3 years back, listened to me cry about his lies and broken promises. And now she was marrying him. You're about to hear an unbelievable true story, so please like and subscribe. Drop your location in the comments. Because what happened next will show you just how deep some betrayals can run. My name is Diana Washington. I'm 45 years old, and I thought I knew the people closest to me. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Coffee brewing, morning light streaming through my kitchen windows, the usual stack of mail waiting on the counter. I'd been living alone in this house since the divorce, finally finding my rhythm again after years of chaos with Marcus. The front door chimed as my daughter Emma let herself in, her nursing scrubs wrinkled from a long night shift at the hospital. "Mom, you look like you've seen a ghost," Emma said, setting down her purse and studying my face with those sharp eyes that miss nothing. At 24, Emma Washington had inherited my stubborn streak and her father's analytical mind. But unlike Marcus, she used it to help people. I picked up the invitation with shaking hands. "Sarah and your father are getting married." Emma's jaw dropped. "What? Sarah Chen? You're Sarah? The Sarah who helped us move your stuff out of Dad's apartment?" "The very same." My voice came out flat, emotionless. "Look at this, Em. 3 weeks from now." Emma snatched the invitation, scanning it quickly. "Mom, this is dated 2 weeks ago. She sent this knowing you'd barely have time to process it before the wedding." Her voice rose with indignation. "How long have they been together? When did this even start?" "I have no idea. She's been distant lately, canceling our weekly dinners, always too busy to talk. I thought she was just dealing with work stress." I sank into my kitchen chair, the weight of realization crushing down on me. "Emma, she was seeing him while she was comforting me about the divorce. She had to be." Emma pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Aunt Rachel. She works with Sarah at the marketing firm. If anyone knows what's really been going on, it's her." Rachel Martinez had been my closest friend since college, even closer than Sarah in many ways. While Sarah was dramatic and emotional, Rachel was steady, practical. She'd warned me about Marcus's wandering eye years before I was ready to listen. 20 minutes later, Rachel was sitting at my kitchen table, her usually perfect hair disheveled from rushing over during her lunch break. She clutched her coffee mug with white knuckles. "Diana, I've been wrestling with this for months," Rachel began, her voice heavy with guilt. "I work 3 cubicles down from Sarah, and I started noticing things. She'd take these long lunch breaks, always checking her phone and smiling at texts. Then I saw her getting into Marcus's car in the parking garage back in February." "February?" My stomach dropped. That's only 4 months after our divorce was finalized. Emma leaned forward. "Rachel, why didn't you tell Mom sooner?" "Because I hoped I was wrong." Rachel's voice cracked. "Sarah swore me to secrecy when I confronted her. She said they'd just started talking, that it wasn't serious. She begged me not to hurt you unnecessarily. I thought maybe it would fizzle out." I felt like the kitchen was spinning around me. "She made you keep her secret while I talked to her about how much Marcus hurt me? While I trusted her with my pain?" "There's more," Rachel said quietly. "Last month, I overheard her on a call with a wedding planner. She was talking about centerpieces and guest lists. Diana, they've been planning this wedding for months. She knew exactly what she was doing when she comforted you about Marcus. Emma slammed her hand on the table. This is sick. She used Mom's vulnerability to cover her own tracks. What kind of friend does that? The betrayal felt like a physical weight in my chest. For 3 years, I'd blamed myself for my marriage failing. Marcus had convinced me I was too demanding, too emotional. And Sarah had been right there, nodding sympathetically, telling me I deserved better, all while planning her own future with the man who'd broken my heart. I keep thinking about all those conversations, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Every time I questioned whether I'd been a good wife, every time I wondered if I'd driven Marcus away, she could have told me the truth about who he really was, but instead, she let me torture myself. Rachel reached across the table and grasped my hand. Diana, you need to know something else. At the office Christmas party, Sarah had too much wine. She started talking about how Marcus told her you were impossible to live with. She was laughing about it with some coworkers, saying she understood why he needed someone more supportive. The words hit me like a slap. Emma's face flushed with anger. She was gossiping about Mom at work parties, using Dad's lies to make herself look better. I should have recorded it, Rachel said miserably. I should have done something sooner. But Diana, there's something about the timeline that doesn't add up. Sarah mentioned they'd been talking for years, not months. I think this started long before your divorce. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of my grandmother's clock on the wall. Years. The dinner parties where Sarah and Marcus had lingered in conversation. The times Sarah had asked pointed questions about our marriage troubles. The way she'd always seemed to know exactly what to say to make me doubt myself further. She wasn't just my friend, I said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. She was his ally. She was feeding him information about how I was feeling, what I was thinking. Emma's eyes blazed. Mom, she helped him manipulate you. She made you think you were crazy for being suspicious of him, then turned around and used everything you told her against you. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, my neighbor was watering her roses, completely oblivious to the fact that my entire understanding of the past 3 years was crumbling. I trusted her with everything, I said, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. When Marcus made me feel like I was losing my mind, Sarah was the one I called. When I couldn't sleep because I thought I was a terrible wife, she was the one who talked me through it. And all along, she was playing both sides, Rachel finished grimly. Diana, I've been watching her at work since I found out. She's not the person we thought she was. She's calculating. Everything she does is for her own benefit. Emma joined me at the window. Mom, what are you going to do? You can't just let this slide. She destroyed your self-esteem and then stole your ex-husband like some kind of prize? I turned back to face Rachel, who was looking at me with worried eyes. Rachel, I need to know everything. Every conversation you overheard, every detail you noticed. If Sarah has been lying to me for years, I need to understand the full scope of what she's done. Rachel nodded grimly. There's a lot more, Diana. Things that made me realize Sarah Chen isn't who any of us thought she was. And that's when the pattern snapped into place. Rachel took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. A few weeks ago, I was working late when I heard Sarah on a phone call in her office. The door was cracked open, and I could hear everything. Diana, she was talking to Marcus about your custody arrangement with Emma. Emma's head snapped up. What about it? She was telling him specific things you'd mentioned to her in confidence. About how you were worried about affording the house payments. About that argument you two had over curfew last month. She was feeding him ammunition to use against you if he ever wanted to change the custody terms. I felt the blood drain from my face. I told Sarah those things because I was stressed. I needed someone to talk to about being a single parent. There's more, Rachel continued, her voice heavy. She mentioned something about when we're married and have more stability to offer Emma. Diana, they're already planning to try for joint custody, maybe even primary custody. The room began to spin slightly. I grabbed the back of my chair for support. She knows how much Emma means to me. She knows losing her would destroy me. Emma stood up abruptly, her face pale with anger. Mom, she can't do this. Dad barely spent time with me when you were married. He only wants custody now to hurt you or to look good for Sarah. Rachel nodded grimly. That's exactly what it sounded like. Sarah was coaching him on what to say, what documentation to keep. She mentioned keeping track of every time Emma complained about anything at your house, every time you seemed overwhelmed. She's been building a case against you, Diana. I sank into my chair, the full weight of the betrayal settling on my shoulders. For 3 years, I'd been calling Sarah whenever I felt inadequate as a mother. Whenever Emma and I had normal teenage conflicts, whenever money was tight, I'd trusted her with my deepest fears about failing my daughter. I feel so stupid, I whispered. Every time I called her crying about parenting struggles, every time I admitted I didn't know what I was doing, she was taking notes. Emma moved to stand behind my chair, placing her hands on my shoulders. Mom, you're not stupid. She's a manipulator. She made you trust her on purpose. Rachel leaned forward, her expression intense. Diana, there's something else. Last week, I saw Sarah printing out emails in the break room. When she left them on the printer by accident, I couldn't help but glance at them. They were email exchanges between her and Marcus from over 2 years ago. They weren't just emotional affairs or friendship. They were planning this whole thing. What kind of planning? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. They discussed the best timing for Marcus to ask for the divorce. Sarah suggested he wait until after your dad's heart surgery, because you'd be more emotionally unstable and less likely to fight for a better settlement. Emma's grip on my shoulders tightened. They planned it around Grandpa's surgery? Mom, you barely slept for weeks taking care of him. The memory of that horrible time came flooding back. Dad in the hospital, me running back and forth between his bedside and home, trying to manage everything. Marcus had seemed so understanding about my absence, so patient with my stress. And Sarah had brought me dinner twice that week, listening to me worry about Dad's recovery while I signed divorce papers. I was too exhausted to read carefully. That's why the settlement was so skewed in his favor, I realized aloud. I was so focused on Dad getting better that I just agreed to whatever Marcus's lawyer proposed. And Sarah kept telling me to just get it over with so I could focus on family. Rachel's expression grew darker. It gets worse, Diana. In those emails, they talked about you like you were an obstacle to remove, not a person with feelings. Sarah wrote things about how clingy and needy you were, how Marcus deserved better than someone who couldn't handle adult responsibilities. I stood up and began pacing again, my mind racing. She sat in my living room and listened to me blame myself for the divorce. She watched me cry and question everything about who I was as a wife and mother. And the whole time, she knew she was part of the reason my marriage fell apart. Emma's voice was shaking with rage. Mom, she didn't just betray your friendship. She helped steal years of your life. She made you think you were the problem when she was actively working against you. Rachel stood up too, moving closer to us. Diana, I kept copies of those emails before Sarah realized she'd left them. I wasn't sure what to do with them. but I knew someday you'd need to see the truth. I turned to face her, something fierce awakening in my chest for the first time in years. Rachel, I need to see everything. Every email, every detail you can remember. If Sarah and Marcus think they can rewrite history and take my daughter away from me, they're about to learn exactly who they're dealing with. Emma smiled for the first time since Rachel arrived. Mom, I haven't seen that look in your eyes since before the divorce. You're getting your fight back. Rachel reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. I hoped you'd say that, because what I found in Sarah's computer files last night changes everything we thought we knew about your marriage. I stared at the manila folder in Rachel's hands, my heart hammering against my ribs. The weight of what she'd discovered was starting to sink in, but there was something else happening inside me too. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was waking up from a fog I hadn't even realized I was living in. Show me, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need to see it all. Rachel opened the folder and pulled out several printed pages. Diana, I need you to prepare yourself. Reading these is going to hurt, but it's also going to make you angry. Really angry. Emma moved closer to me, her presence warm and reassuring. Mom, whatever's in there, we'll deal with it together. You're not alone this time. I took the first page from Rachel's hands. The email was dated 2 months before Marcus asked for the divorce. Sarah's words jumped off the page like slaps across my face. She described me as emotionally exhausting and complained about how I called her too often when I was struggling with what I thought were normal marriage problems. Worse, she detailed conversations I'd had with her in confidence, private moments when I'd shared my deepest insecurities about feeling disconnected from Marcus. She was reporting back to him, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Every time I confided in her about feeling like Marcus was pulling away, she was telling him exactly what I said. Rachel nodded grimly. Keep reading. It gets worse. The next email made my hands shake. Sarah had written to Marcus about a particular evening when I'd called her crying because Marcus had missed Emma's school play for a work event. I remembered that night so clearly. I'd felt guilty for being upset, wondering if I was being too needy, if I was asking too much of my husband to prioritize family sometimes. Sarah had spent an hour on the phone reassuring me that my feelings were valid, that any wife would feel hurt in that situation. But in the email, she mocked me for being clingy and dramatic, and suggested that Marcus needed a woman who understood that successful men have priorities beyond hand-holding their wives through every minor disappointment. I can't believe this, I said, my voice barely audible. She comforted me that night. She made me feel better, like I wasn't crazy for wanting my husband to care about the things that mattered to me. Emma read over my shoulder, her face growing redder with each line. Mom, she was playing both sides. She was your friend to your face and working against you behind your back. I looked up at Rachel, something fierce burning in my chest now. How long do you think this was going on? Based on what I found, at least 8 months before Marcus filed for divorce. Maybe longer. Rachel's expression was pained. Diana, there are emails where they discuss strategy. How to make you seem unstable during the custody negotiations. How to time the divorce announcement for maximum advantage. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Then Emma's hand found mine, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, righteous anger. They played me, I said, my voice growing stronger. They both played me like I was some kind of game piece to be moved around the board. Rachel handed me another page. This one is from right after your dad's surgery. Sarah writes about how convenient it was that you were distracted and exhausted, how it made you much more manageable during the settlement negotiations. I read Sarah's words describing my grief and exhaustion as opportunities to exploit, and something inside me snapped into place. The woman who had cried with me at my father's bedside, who had brought soup and told me I was being strong for my family, had seen my pain as a tactical advantage. "Emma," I said, standing up and feeling more solid on my feet than I had in months. "I need you to know something. Everything I've told you about the divorce, about my mistakes, about not being enough for your father, I want you to forget all of that." Emma's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've spent 3 years believing I failed at my marriage because 2 people I trusted made me believe it. They wanted me to think I was the problem so I wouldn't look too closely at what they were really doing." I turned to Rachel, gratitude flooding through me. "Thank you for showing me this. I know it couldn't have been easy to bring this to me." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "Diana, I'm so sorry I didn't figure it out sooner. I should have seen what Sarah was doing." "You couldn't have known. She fooled me completely, and I lived with her lies every day." I walked to the window, looking out at the street where I'd rebuilt my life after everything fell apart. But now I know the truth, and everything changes. Emma joined me at the window. "What are you thinking, Mom?" I turned back to both of them, feeling more like myself than I had since before my marriage started falling apart. "I'm thinking that Sarah made a crucial mistake when she decided to target my relationship with you. If she'd been content with taking Marcus and disappearing, I might have let them live with their lies. But she wants to take my daughter away from me, and that's where I draw the line." Rachel leaned forward. "What do you want to do?" "I want to show Marcus and Sarah exactly who they're dealing with. The woman they manipulated and controlled? She's gone. And they have no idea what I'm capable of when I'm not believing their lies about who I am." Emma smiled, but there was worry in her eyes too. "Mom, they've been planning this for years. What makes you think we can beat them?" I looked at the emails scattered across my coffee table, evidence of their arrogance and cruelty laid out in black and white. "Because they made one mistake that's going to cost them everything. They documented their conspiracy in writing, and they have no idea we know about it." Rachel's expression shifted from sympathy to something sharper. "Diana, there's one more thing in those files. Something that changes the custody situation completely, but I wasn't sure if I should." "Tell me," I said firmly. "No more secrets, no more protection from the truth. What did you find?" Rachel hesitated, her hand hovering over the stack of documents. "There are financial records in here, Diana. Marcus has been hiding assets from you since before the divorce was even final. Accounts he opened with Sarah, property investments, even a business they started together using money he claimed was for Emma's college fund." The room went silent. Emma's face drained of color. "My college fund?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but it wasn't the familiar hurt I'd grown accustomed to. It was pure, crystalline anger. "Show me." Rachel pulled out a series of bank statements and property documents. "They've been building a portfolio together for at least 2 years before your divorce. Look at this." She pointed to a series of transactions. "These deposits match exactly with the amounts Marcus told you he was putting away for Emma's education." Emma leaned over my shoulder, reading the documents. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, this is why you've been working 2 jobs. You thought there wasn't enough money for my college because Dad said the fund wasn't as big as expected." I studied the papers, my mind racing. The small apartment I'd been ashamed of, the nights I'd stayed awake worrying about Emma's future. The guilt I'd carried about not being able to provide better for her after the divorce. All of it based on lies. "There's more," Rachel said quietly. "The business they started, it's in Sarah's name, but the initial investment came from your joint accounts. Technically, you're entitled to half of everything they built with that money." Emma stood up abruptly, pacing to the other side of the room. "I can't believe this. All those times Dad lectured me about being responsible with money, about understanding the value of things because times were tight." "Emma," I said, watching my daughter process this betrayal. The way her shoulders tensed reminded me so much of myself these past 3 years, carrying burdens that were never meant to be ours. She turned back to me, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen since she was little, and someone had been mean to her at school. A fierce protectiveness, but this time it was directed at me. "Mom, they stole from us. They stole from you, and they made you believe it was your fault that we struggled." Rachel gathered the documents into neat piles. "Diana, with this evidence, you could not only protect yourself from their custody manipulation, you could potentially reclaim what's rightfully yours, but it would mean going to war with them." I looked between my daughter and my friend, these two people who had stood by me when I couldn't even stand by myself. Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her jaw was set with determination. Rachel's expression was steady, supportive, waiting for my decision. "I've been avoiding conflict for 3 years," I said slowly. I told myself it was for Emma's sake, to keep the peace, to be the bigger person. But really, I was just scared. Scared they were right about me being weak and incapable. Emma came back to sit beside me. "You're not weak, Mom. You're the strongest person I know. You rebuilt everything from nothing because you thought you had to." "But I didn't have to," I said, the realization hitting me fully. "They took everything and then convinced me I deserved nothing." Rachel leaned forward. "The question is, what do you want to do about it? Because once we start down this path, there's no going back to the way things were." I thought about Sarah's smug confidence in her emails, her certainty that she could manipulate Emma against me. I thought about Marcus, who had shared a bed with me for 8 years while planning his escape with my best friend. But mostly, I thought about Emma, who deserved better than to be caught in their web of lies. "I want to do something they'll never expect," I said, feeling the last pieces of my old, uncertain self fall away. "I want to give them exactly what they think they want." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine and dangerous. "Sarah wants to believe she's smarter than me, that she can manipulate me into giving up without a fight. Marcus wants to think he's moved on to something better. So we're going to let them think they've won, right up until the moment we show them how wrong they've been about everything." Rachel's eyes lit up with understanding. "You want to let them make the first move." "More than that," I said, looking at the evidence of their betrayal spread across my coffee table. "I want them to make every move they're planning. I want them to reveal just how far they're willing to go. Because the deeper they dig themselves in, the harder it will be for them to climb back out." Emma was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "Mom, what if this changes everything? What if fighting back means our whole family falls apart?" I reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "Sweetheart, our family already fell apart. These people just convinced us it was our fault. Now it's time to build something real, something honest. And that starts with refusing to let them steal one more day of our lives." The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Emma was already in the kitchen making coffee when I came downstairs, and she looked up at me with something that might have been pride. "You look different," she said, handing me a mug. "More like yourself, if that makes sense." It did make sense. For the first time since my divorce, I felt like I was inhabiting my own life instead of just surviving it. "I've been thinking about what we discussed last night," I said, settling at the kitchen table where those photos still lay in neat stacks. "About letting them make their moves first." Emma sat across from me. "Are you sure you want to do this? I mean, what if they try to drag me deeper into whatever they're planning?" "Then we'll know exactly where they stand," I said, "and you'll know exactly who they really are." My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. The casual tone made my stomach turn, knowing what I now knew about her true intentions. "Coffee later? I have some exciting news to share." Emma read over my shoulder. "That's got to be about the engagement." "Probably," I typed back quickly. "Can't wait to hear." "My place at 2? You're really going to let her come here and lie to your face?" Emma asked. "I'm going to let her think she's fooling me, just like she has been for 3 years. There's a difference." Rachel arrived just before Sarah was due, slipping in through the back door like we'd planned. She'd agreed to listen from the guest room, close enough to hear everything but hidden from view. "Are you ready for this?" Rachel asked, squeezing my shoulder. "I think so. It's strange, but I feel calmer than I have in months." "That's because you're finally fighting back instead of just taking hits," Emma said. She decided to stay for Sarah's visit, curious to see how our former family friend would handle the conversation with her watching. Sarah arrived precisely at 2, practically glowing with excitement. She hugged me a little too tightly, a little too long, and I wondered how I'd missed the performance aspect of it before. "You look wonderful," she gushed, settling into my living room like she belonged there. "I'm so glad we've stayed close through everything." Emma sat quietly in the corner chair, observing. Sarah barely acknowledged her presence, which struck me as odd for someone supposedly concerned about my daughter's well-being. "So," Sarah continued, "I have the most incredible news. Marcus proposed." She held out her hand, displaying a ring that looked remarkably similar to the one he'd given me 12 years ago. The same style, just a different stone. "Congratulations," I managed, injecting what I hoped was the right amount of surprise into my voice. "When did this happen?" "Last weekend. We went to that little restaurant where you two used to go for anniversaries, do you remember? He said he'd been planning it for months." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was telling me he'd proposed at our special place, and she was enjoying every second of my supposed ignorance. Emma shifted in her chair, her face carefully neutral, but I could see the anger building behind her eyes. "That's so romantic," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Have you set a date?" "Well, that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." Sarah leaned forward conspiratorially. "We're thinking about a Christmas wedding. I know it's soon, but when you know, right?" "Christmas," I repeated. "That's only 3 months away. I was hoping you'd help me plan it. You always were so good at organizing events, and it would mean the world to me to have your support." Emma made a small sound, quickly covering it with a cough. Sarah wanted me to plan her wedding to my ex-husband. The audacity was breathtaking. "I'm flattered you'd ask," I said carefully. "But don't you think that might be awkward? I mean, given the circumstances?" Sarah waved dismissively. "Oh, please. You and Marcus have been divorced for 3 years. We're all adults here. Besides, I think it would be healing for everyone if we could come together as a family." "A family?" Emma said quietly from her corner. It was the first time she'd spoken since Sarah arrived. Of course, sweetheart. Sarah turned to her with that bright, artificial smile. You'll always be family to me, no matter what happens. And I hope you know that Marcus and I want you to feel completely comfortable with our relationship. How long have you been dating? Emma asked, her tone deceptively casual. Sarah's smile flickered for just a moment. About 8 months now. It started very naturally, very gradually. We were both helping your mother through some difficult times, and we just found ourselves drawn to each other. I had to admire the story they'd constructed. Supportive friends who fell in love while helping the poor, struggling divorcee. It painted them as noble and me as pitiable. 8 months, Emma repeated thoughtfully. So that would be right around the time Mom was having those panic attacks. Exactly. We were both so worried about her. Sarah reached over and patted my hand. You were in such a dark place last winter. I'm just glad you're doing better now. The pieces of their narrative were becoming clear. They'd positioned themselves as my rescuers, my support system, while secretly planning their future together. Every time I'd called Sarah for comfort, every time Marcus had offered to help with something, they'd been building evidence of my weakness, my dependence on them. Well, I said, standing up slowly. This is certainly a lot to process. A Christmas wedding, helping with the planning. I'll need some time to think about it. Of course, Sarah said, rising as well. I know it's a big ask, but I really hope you'll say yes. It would make everything perfect. After she left, the three of us sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Emma spoke. She actually wants you to plan their wedding. She wants you to pick flowers and choose menus and help her celebrate stealing your husband. And she wants me to be grateful for the opportunity, I added. To prove what a good sport I am, how well I've moved on. Rachel emerged from the guest room, her face grim. Did you catch the timeline? 8 months ago was when Marcus started pushing for changes to the custody agreement, when he suddenly became concerned about Emma spending too much time here. The full scope of their manipulation was becoming clear, but instead of feeling defeated, I felt energized. They'd underestimated me so completely, been so confident in their superiority, that they'd revealed everything. So, what's the plan? Emma asked. Because I can't watch you help plan their wedding. I just can't. I looked at my daughter, at Rachel, at the evidence of betrayal still scattered on my coffee table, and made my decision. We're going to give Sarah exactly what she wants, I said. I'm going to help plan their perfect Christmas wedding. And by the time December arrives, everyone is going to know exactly who these people really are. Rachel leaned forward in her chair, studying my face carefully. Okay, I need you to walk me through this plan of yours, because right now it sounds like you're signing up for months of torture. That's what I'm worried about too, Emma said, pulling her legs up under her on the couch. Mom, you've been doing so well lately, getting stronger, building your confidence back up. I don't want to watch them tear you down again. I moved to the window, looking out at the garden I'd been nurturing since the divorce. The late roses were still blooming, defiant against the approaching autumn. They think they know me. They think I'm the same broken woman who couldn't function without their help last winter. But I'm not. So, explain it to us, Rachel said. What exactly are you planning to do? I turned back to face them. Sarah wants me to plan their wedding because she thinks it will prove her power over me. She wants me to smile and nod and arrange flowers while she parades around in her white dress, showing everyone how magnanimous she is for including the pathetic ex-wife. Right. And that helps you how? Emma's voice was skeptical. Because she's going to give me access to everything. Guest lists, family contacts, vendor meetings, venue visits. She'll want me involved in every detail because my participation validates her narrative that this is all perfectly normal and healthy. Rachel's eyes began to narrow with understanding. You're going to document everything. More than that, I'm going to let them show everyone exactly who they are. Sarah won't be able to resist making little comments, dropping hints about their timeline, their story. Marcus will want to be involved too, probably offering to help coordinate things. They'll both get comfortable, maybe even a little careless. Emma was shaking her head. But what's the end game, Mom? So you catch them in lies, so what? People already know they're together now. Do they, though? I sat back down, leaning forward. Think about what Sarah just told us. They've been very careful about their story. Gradual attraction, supporting the struggling ex-wife, waiting a respectable amount of time. They've positioned themselves as the good guys in this situation. Which they're not, Rachel said flatly. Exactly. But right now, it's my word against theirs. And they've spent months making me look unstable, dependent, unable to cope. If I start telling people they were having an affair during my marriage, I look like the bitter ex-wife making accusations. Emma was beginning to follow my logic. But if you help plan their wedding, you look reasonable, supportive, even. And while I'm being reasonable and supportive, I'll be paying very close attention to everything they say and do. Recording conversations when appropriate, documenting inconsistencies in their timeline, gathering evidence of how they really operated during my marriage. Rachel stood up and began pacing. It's risky. You'll be putting yourself in their orbit for months, subjecting yourself to their manipulation on a regular basis. I know, but Rachel, I can't move forward with my life while they control the narrative. Right now, people think Marcus left me because I was difficult to live with, because I had problems he couldn't handle. They think Sarah stepped in as my friend and ended up falling in love with him naturally. And you want to prove that's not what happened, Emma said. I want people to know the truth, that they were planning this while I was still married, that every time I called Sarah for support, she was probably on the phone with Marcus 5 minutes later, sharing what I'd said. That his sudden concerns about custody weren't about Emma's well-being, they were about limiting his financial obligations so he could start fresh with his new wife. Emma's expression was hardening. He has been pushing for more shared custody lately, saying it would be good for me to spend equal time in both homes. Right around the time he would have been thinking about combining households with Sarah, I said. It all fits together, but it's circumstantial unless I can get them to admit things. Rachel stopped pacing and looked at me directly. You realize this could backfire spectacularly. If they figure out what you're doing, they could make your life very difficult. Marcus still has shared custody, still has ways to complicate things for you. I know, but I've been thinking about that too. The beauty of their own narrative is that it traps them. If they're such good, supportive people who only want what's best for me, they can't suddenly become vindictive without proving my point. Emma was quiet for a long moment, then said, What do you need from me? I need you to be honest with me if you think I'm losing perspective. This only works if I can stay calm and rational throughout the whole process. If I start getting emotional or reactive, it falls apart. And what do you need from me? Rachel asked. I need someone I can debrief with after every interaction. Someone who can help me process what they're saying and doing without getting caught up in the manipulation. And I need you to remind me why I'm doing this when it gets difficult. Rachel nodded slowly. Because you deserve to have people know the truth about what happened to your marriage. And because Emma deserves to know who her father really is, not just the version of himself he presents to her. Emma looked uncomfortable. Mom, I already know Dad isn't perfect. I've seen how he operates. But you still love him, and you should. He's your father. I just want to make sure that when you make decisions about your relationship with him, you're working with complete information. The room fell quiet as we all considered the implications of what I was proposing. Finally, Rachel spoke. Okay, let's say you go through with this. How long are we talking about? Sarah said, Christmas. So that's about 3 months of wedding planning. 3 months of very intensive contact with both of them. And probably with Marcus's family too, since they'll be invited to the wedding. People who might have insights into the timeline, who might let things slip. Emma looked worried again. What if his family doesn't know you're the ex-wife? What if Sarah introduces you as just a friend helping with the wedding? I felt a chill run through me as I realized Emma was probably right. That would actually make sense from their perspective. Less awkward questions, less chance of someone saying something inappropriate. So, you'd be sitting in rooms with Marcus's parents, his siblings, helping plan his wedding while they have no idea you used to be married to him, Rachel said. That's a special kind of torture. Or a special kind of opportunity, I said, though my voice sounded less confident than I wanted. People might be much more honest about Marcus and Sarah's relationship if they don't know I'm his ex-wife. The phone rang suddenly, making all three of us jump. Emma reached for it before I could stop her. Hello? Oh, hi, Dad. She looked at me with wide eyes. No, I'm still at Mom's. We're just talking. I could hear Marcus's voice through the phone, though I couldn't make out the words. Emma's responses were careful, measured. Yeah, she told me. Congratulations. A pause. No, I think she's still processing it. Another pause, longer this time. I don't know, Dad. You'd have to ask her yourself. Emma held the phone out to me. He wants to talk to you. I stared at the phone for a moment, then looked at Rachel and Emma. This was it. The first test of whether I could actually pull this off. I took the phone, and Rachel and Emma watched my face intently as Marcus's familiar voice filled my ear. Hi, Marcus. I kept my tone neutral, pleasant. I hope Sarah didn't blindside you too badly today. I wanted to be the one to tell you, but she was so excited about the wedding planning idea. It's fine. I'm happy for you both. The words felt like sandpaper in my throat. Are you really? Because I know this is complicated, and I want to make sure Emma doesn't feel caught in the middle of anything uncomfortable. The concern in his voice sounded genuine, which somehow made it worse. This was the Marcus I'd fallen in love with, the one who seemed to care so deeply about everyone's feelings. Marcus, we're adults. We can handle this maturely. If Sarah wants my help with the wedding planning, I'm willing to consider it. That would mean everything to her. To both of us, really. I think it could be really healing, you know? A way to show Emma that we can all move forward together. There it was. They wanted me to perform forgiveness and acceptance, to be the smiling ex-wife who proved their story of amicable divorce and natural attraction. Let me think about it, I said. Sarah mentioned Christmas, so there's time to figure out the logistics. Of course, no pressure, but I really hope you'll say yes. I think it could be good for all of us. After I hung up, Emma and Rachel stared at me expectantly. Well? Rachel asked. He wants me to do it too. They both want me involved because it legitimizes their story. If the ex-wife is helping plan the wedding, then obviously there's no hard feelings, no ugly history. And what did you tell him? That I'd think about it, but I've already decided. I looked at both of them. I'm going to call Sarah tomorrow and tell her yes. I'm going to plan their perfect Christmas wedding. Emma took a deep breath. Then we better start preparing for the worst 3 months of your life. Or, I said, feeling a spark of determination I hadn't felt in months. The 3 months that finally set me free. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in months, I had a plan that felt like mine instead of something happening to me. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with my phone, staring at Sarah's contact information. My finger hovered over her number for what felt like an eternity. 3 months ago, calling Sarah would have been as natural as breathing. Now it felt like preparing for battle. When I finally dialed, she picked up on the first ring. "Oh my God, I was hoping you'd call. I barely slept last night thinking about everything." Sarah's voice bubbled with excitement, the same tone she used to use when we'd stay up planning girls' trips or discussing her latest work drama. "Did you really mean it about helping with the wedding?" "I meant it," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "If you want my help, I'm willing to do it." "I can't believe this. I was so scared you'd hate me forever. Marcus said you seemed okay on the phone last night, but I thought maybe he was just trying to make me feel better." The casual way she mentioned Marcus, like he was just naturally part of our conversation now, sent a familiar stab through my chest. But I pushed it down. "Sarah, I'm not going to pretend this isn't complicated. But Emma is what matters most to me, and if we're all going to be in each other's lives, we need to find a way to make it work." That's exactly what I told Marcus. Emma needs to see that adults can handle difficult situations with grace. We're setting an example for her. I almost laughed at that. Sarah had no idea what kind of example she was actually setting, but I bit my tongue. "So tell me about your vision for the wedding," I said instead. For the next 45 minutes, Sarah painted a picture of her perfect Christmas wedding. The venue would be the historic inn where Marcus and I had celebrated our 5th anniversary. The colors would be deep red and gold, the same combination I'd chosen for our last Christmas as a married couple. She wanted winter flowers, a string quartet, and a reception that felt both elegant and cozy. Every detail felt like a deliberate echo of my marriage to Marcus, though Sarah seemed oblivious to the parallels. "I'm thinking late afternoon ceremony, right around 4 o'clock when the light gets all golden," she said. "Marcus mentioned you always loved that time of day." "Did he?" I said flatly. "Oh, I hope that's not weird that he told me that. We talk about everything now, and sometimes the conversation just naturally includes things from before. I mean, you were such a big part of his life for so long." Were past tense, like I was a chapter that had been read and closed. "It's fine, Sarah. If I'm going to help you plan this wedding, we're going to have to be able to talk about these things." You're absolutely right. I'm probably overthinking everything because I want this to work so badly. Our friendship means everything to me, and I'd never forgive myself if I lost you over this. The irony was breathtaking. She was worried about losing me over falling in love with my ex-husband, as if that was just an unfortunate coincidence rather than a fundamental betrayal. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling like I'd just signed up for emotional warfare disguised as wedding planning. Emma called an hour later. "How did it go with Sarah?" "She's over the moon. We're meeting for coffee tomorrow to start making lists and talking vendors." "Mom, are you sure about this? You sounded pretty confident last night, but in the cold light of day, this seems like a recipe for disaster." I could hear the worry in Emma's voice, the same protective tone she'd been using with me since the divorce. It broke my heart that my daughter felt like she needed to take care of me. "Emma, I need to do this. Not just for you, but for me." I've spent the last 8 months feeling like a victim of other people's choices. This is the first time I've felt like I have any control over what happens next. But what if it just makes everything worse? What if you end up more hurt than you already are? It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself since yesterday. Then at least I'll know I tried to take control of my own story, instead of just letting other people write it for me. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Okay, but promise me something. If this gets too hard, if it's damaging you instead of helping you, promise you'll stop. I promise. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I meant it. This wedding planning arrangement felt like my one chance to reclaim something of myself, to prove that I wasn't just the woman who got left behind. The next afternoon, I met Sarah at our old coffee shop. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at the corner table we'd claimed as ours during countless conversations over the years. She'd spread out bridal magazines, her laptop, and what looked like 3 different planning notebooks. I may have gone a little overboard, she said, gesturing at the organized chaos covering our table. But I figured if we're doing this, we should do it right. Looking at her sitting there, surrounded by wedding plans, I felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing my best friend's face. This was Sarah, who used to make fun of elaborate weddings. Sarah, who once said she'd rather elope than deal with the stress of planning a big celebration. This is quite a production, I said, settling into my chair. I know it seems like a lot, but Marcus deserves something special. We both do. We've waited so long to be together. Have you? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Sarah's face flushed slightly. I mean, obviously we didn't act on our feelings while you two were married. But looking back, I think the connection was always there, you know? Sometimes these things are just meant to be. That was when I realized that Sarah had rewritten history in her own mind. She genuinely seemed to believe that this had been some kind of destined love story rather than a betrayal between friends. And that was when I knew that my plan to help with the wedding wasn't just about proving I could handle it gracefully. It was about finding out exactly how long this had really been going on. So, I said, picking up one of the magazines and flipping through it casually. When did you first realize you had feelings for Marcus? I mean, looking back now. Sarah's hands stilled on her laptop keyboard. Oh, well, you know how these things develop. It's hard to pinpoint exactly. Try me. I'm curious about the timeline. I kept my voice light, conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. I guess maybe around your 2nd anniversary? You remember that dinner party you threw? Marcus was telling that story about his college roommate, and I just found myself really listening to him, you know, like really seeing him for the first time. My 2nd anniversary. That was 6 years ago, not the recent development she'd originally claimed. That's interesting, I said, turning a page. I remember that party. You seemed to laugh at all his jokes that night. Did I? I don't really remember. But her cheeks were definitely redder now. And then what? Did the feelings just stay dormant for 4 whole years? Sarah closed her laptop with a little too much force. Why are you asking me this? I thought you wanted to help with the wedding planning. I do. I'm just trying to understand your love story so I can help make the day more meaningful. Don't all the best weddings reflect the couple's journey? She relaxed slightly at that explanation. Right, of course. Well, the feelings weren't constant or anything. They'd come and go. Sometimes I'd catch myself thinking about him, but I pushed those thoughts away because you're my best friend. That must have been hard, suppressing feelings for so long. It was, she said, and for a moment her voice carried what sounded like genuine pain. especially during your rough patches. My pen froze over the notebook where I'd been pretending to take notes. What rough patches? Oh, when you'd complain about him leaving dishes in the sink, or how he always watched sports on Sundays instead of spending time with you. Little things, but I could see how frustrated you were getting. The room felt like it was tilting. Those conversations, those private, intimate complaints I'd shared with my best friend when I needed to vent. She'd been listening, but not to support me. She'd been cataloging Marcus's flaws and my dissatisfactions like evidence. You remember a lot of details about our marital problems, I said carefully. Well, you talked to me about them. A lot. I was just being a good friend, listening when you needed to vent. And while I was venting to you about my marriage problems, you were developing feelings for my husband. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Sarah's face went through several expressions before settling on defensive. It wasn't like that. I never encouraged those feelings, and I never acted on them while you were married. But you were glad when we started having problems. That's not fair. Isn't it? Sarah, think about what you just told me. You developed feelings for Marcus 6 years ago, and then spent 4 years listening to me complain about my marriage while secretly wanting him for yourself. How is that not a massive betrayal of our friendship? Sarah's careful composure finally cracked. Because I didn't choose to feel that way. Do you think I wanted to fall for my best friend's husband? Do you think that was easy for me? But you didn't tell me. You didn't step back from our friendship to protect me, or him, or even yourself. You stayed right there in the middle of my marriage, collecting information. I was being your friend. No, Sarah. Friends don't listen to you complain about your husband while secretly planning to comfort him later. Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the coffee shop floor. I think this was a mistake. I thought you were ready to move forward, but you're clearly not. Sit down. Something in my voice made her pause. Maybe it was the fact that I wasn't yelling or crying or falling apart the way she expected. Please, I added more gently. Sit down, I'm not done talking. She sat, but perched on the edge of her chair like she was ready to bolt. I want to know when you first acted on those feelings. Not when you got together officially. When you first crossed the line. I told you, we never did anything while you were married. I don't believe you. The silence stretched between us. Sarah's hands were clenched in her lap, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. The Valentine's Day text, I said suddenly, the memory hitting me like a physical blow. 3 months before Marcus asked for the divorce. He got a text that night that made him smile, but when I asked about it, he said it was just work. But it was February 14th, Sarah. Who texts about work on Valentine's Day? Sarah's face had gone completely white. That was you, wasn't it? Sarah's silence was answer enough, but I needed to hear her say it. It was just a simple Happy Valentine's Day message, she whispered finally. That's all. I told myself it was innocent. But it wasn't innocent, was it? You knew exactly what you were doing. You were reaching out to my husband on the most romantic day of the year, while I was sitting right next to him on our couch. I was lonely, okay? I had been single for 2 years, and I was watching all my friends with their partners, and I wanted someone to acknowledge that I existed. So you chose my husband. It was one text message. No, Sarah, it was the beginning, because he texted you back, didn't he? And it felt good. It felt like a secret between the two of you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy for her. Not anymore. How long did the texting go on before I found those messages on his phone in April? What messages in April? I studied her face carefully. She looked genuinely confused, which somehow made everything worse. Marcus had been texting someone he had saved as Sam in his phone. I saw them when he was in the shower. Casual conversation, nothing obviously romantic, but something about the tone felt off. When I confronted him, he said it was a coworker, but he got defensive in a way that didn't make sense. Sarah shook her head slowly. That wasn't me. I mean, yes, we texted sometimes after Valentine's Day, but not frequently, and definitely not under a fake name. A chill ran down my spine. Then who was Sam? I don't know. I really don't know. For the first time since she'd walked into the coffee shop, Sarah looked as confused and hurt as I felt. Marcus never mentioned anyone named Sam to you? Never. And I thought I knew everything about his life by then. He talked to me about work, about his friends, about his feelings regarding the marriage. She paused. About you. What did he say about me? Sarah hesitated, and I could see her weighing how much truth I could handle. That he felt like you two had grown apart? That you seemed angry all the time, even when you weren't fighting? That he didn't know how to make you happy anymore? And you agreed with him. I listened to him. There's a difference. Is there? Because while you were listening to him complain about me, and while he was apparently texting this mysterious Sam person, you were both working together to undermine my marriage. That's not what we were doing. Then what were you doing, Sarah? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my husband was cultivating at least 2 emotional affairs while I was trying to figure out why our marriage was falling apart. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than before. I think he was trying to figure out if he wanted to stay married to you. The honesty of it hit me like a slap. And you were helping him figure that out. I was just there, available, listening. While having feelings for him that you never disclosed to me? Yes. And now you're marrying him? Yes. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. The conversation had taken turns I hadn't expected, and now I had more questions than answers. Sarah, I need you to think very carefully about what I'm going to ask you next. She nodded, wiping her eyes with a napkin. During those months when you were texting and talking, did Marcus ever mention feeling conflicted about leaving me? Did he ever say he wasn't sure about divorce? Why does that matter now? Because I think Marcus might have been playing both of us. Sarah's expression shifted, confusion mixing with something that looked like dawning realization. What do you mean, playing both of us? I took a deep breath, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving starting to fall into place. Think about it, Sarah. He was telling you I was angry all the time, that he couldn't make me happy. But at home, he was being distant and secretive, doing things that would naturally make me suspicious and upset. And then there's this mysterious Sam person neither of us can account for. You think he was deliberately making you angry? I think he was creating the narrative he wanted. If I'm the angry, unreasonable wife, then he's justified in seeking emotional support elsewhere. And if you're seeing him as this misunderstood husband trapped in an unhappy marriage, then you're more likely to develop feelings for him. Sarah stared at her coffee cup. But why would he do that? Because Marcus likes to be the center of attention. He likes to be needed, wanted, fought over. During our marriage, I stopped doing that. I got comfortable, secure. Maybe that wasn't enough for him anymore. So you think he was manipulating both of us? I think he was keeping his options open. If our marriage had miraculously fixed itself, he could have dropped you and claimed he was just venting to a friend. If I had found out about you earlier and left him, he could have played the victim whose wife abandoned him. But this way, He got to be the one who chose to leave, and he had you waiting in the wings. Sarah looked stricken. And I just went along with it. We both did, Sarah. The difference is, I was married to him. You were supposed to be loyal to me. We sat in silence for several minutes. The coffee shop had grown busier around us, but I felt insulated from the normal world by the weight of our conversation. What happens now? Sarah finally asked. I don't know. That's up to you, I guess. What would you do, if you were me? I considered the question carefully. I'd ask myself if I could ever really trust him. If he did this to me, with you, what's to stop him from doing it to you with someone else when the novelty wears off? You think he'll cheat on me? I think Marcus needs constant validation. And I think when he stops getting it from you the way he wants it, he'll start looking elsewhere. Just like he did with me. Sarah's hands were shaking slightly as she picked up her coffee cup. I've already sent out save the dates. That's not a reason to marry someone. No, but it's a reason to be really sure before I don't marry someone. I felt an unexpected stab of sympathy for her. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the hurt, Sarah was still my friend. Or had been. Some part of me still cared about what happened to her. Sarah, can I ask you something? Sure. When Marcus talks about the future with you, does he ever compare your relationship to his marriage with me? She nodded slowly. He says things like, you actually listen to me, unlike some people, or, it's so nice to be with someone who appreciates me. He's still defining your relationship in terms of me. That's not healthy. I never thought about it that way. And what about when you two have disagreements? How does he handle conflict with you? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. We don't really fight. He usually just shuts down when I try to bring up anything serious. Like what? Like moving in together before the wedding? Or talking about finances? Or why he still has dating apps on his phone? My eyebrows shot up. He has dating apps? He says he forgot to delete them, that he doesn't use them. Sarah. I know how it sounds. Do you know how it sounds? Because it sounds like he's doing exactly the same thing to you that he did to me. She put her head in her hands. I feel so stupid. You're not stupid. You're in love with someone who's very good at making people feel special until he doesn't need them to feel special anymore. When Sarah looked up, there were fresh tears in her eyes. I don't know how to untangle myself from this. We work together. All our friends are expecting a wedding. I've been talking about this relationship for months. Those aren't reasons to stay with someone who's showing you red flags. But what if I'm wrong? What if he's different with me? What if you're right, and he's exactly the same? We finished our coffee in contemplative silence. As we prepared to leave, Sarah turned to me one more time. I'm sorry, Elena, for all of it. For not telling you about my feelings, for not stepping back when I should have, for hurting you. I know you are. Does that matter? I considered her question as we walked toward the parking lot. It matters that you're sorry. It doesn't fix what happened, but it matters. Will you ever be able to forgive me? I don't know. Maybe someday. But Sarah, the person you really need to make peace with is yourself. You need to figure out who you want to be and what kind of relationships you want to have. Because this pattern, this whole situation, it's not sustainable. As I drove home, I realized that for the first time in months, I felt clear-headed about everything that had happened. The mystery of Sam was still unsolved, but somehow that mattered less than understanding the larger picture of how Marcus operated. My phone buzzed with a text as I pulled into my driveway. It was from Sarah. "Thank you for being honest with me today. I have a lot to think about." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat in my car for a few minutes, thinking about second chances and trust, and the difference between forgiving someone and allowing them back into your life. Finally, I texted back. "Take care of yourself, Sarah. You deserve better than settling for someone who makes you feel like you have to compete for their attention." Whether she would take that advice remained to be seen. But for the first time since this whole mess began, that felt like her problem to solve, not mine.